The Ryzen 7 7800X 3D is still an absolute monster of a CPU. It was the best gaming chip in the world for 22 months, and that was only one generation ago, and it's still fairly expensive as gaming CPUs go. So, why am I talking about it? The guy who reviews second-hand GPUs with a moderately priced gaming PC with a Ryzen 5 7500F on board. The guy who does retrospectives on 15-year-old i7s. Doesn't this kind of miss the point of the whole channel? Oh, shut up. This video was sponsored by AliExpress and their back-to-school sale. There's up to 80% discount on products across the site, with clearance items on sale for as little as £1. That's £1 in money, not weight. I'm British, that's what we call our currency. What's more, you can use my discount codes on screen now to get money off pretty much anything on AliExpress, including the Ryzen 5 7500F, Ryzen 7 7700, or the 7800X 3D featured in this video, so you don't have to worry that the thing you actually want isn't going to be on sale. UK viewers can also join the Iceberg tech team and claim cashback to use on your next purchase. Gain points for the team by logging in, browsing and placing orders to increase the amount of cashback everybody in the team gets, up to a maximum of 10%. Just use the QR code on screen, search Iceberg in the app, or click the link in the description. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I kinda threw this video together at the last minute. I was supposed to be testing the Ryzen 7 7700, but it fell through, and this is all I had on hand that I hadn't made a video about yet. I chose the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D late last year as the heart of my sensibly priced high-end gaming PC, which I built for testing higher-end graphics cards. Of course, I don't really review that many new fancy pants GPUs except when one of the brands has a review sample to lend me, but for those few occasions where I do need something with some extra oomph, it's good to have around. The Ryzen 7 7800X 3D is a 2023 CPU for the AM5 socket, with 8 cores and 16 threads. Nothing special about that in this day and age, but the highlight feature is the 3D V-cache, AMD's method of allowing for more level 3 cache without using more area on the CPU or adding latency by moving the cache further away from the cores. As well as the standard 32MB of L3 cache that would be found on a regular Ryzen chip of this generation, the X3D model has an extra 64MB sandwiched on top for a total of 96MB. This is now proven technology. AMD already made waves with the 5800X 3D and the cut-price 5700X 3D last generation, and the new 9000 series models have since refined the layout of the cache even further. The 7800X 3D does, however, have the same limitations as the 5000 series models, in that there's no overclocking or other frequency gains to be had. The CPU goes up to 5 GHz in single-core tasks, and about 4.9 in all-core workloads, and that puts it at a disadvantage in non-gaming applications, especially next to an overclockable non-3D model. My test platform today is a B650E ITX motherboard from ASUS. The RAM is 32GB of Corsair 6000 CL30, tuned to Buildzoid's lazy Hynix timings, and the GPU is the best I have, the Radeon RX 7900 XT. Yes, I know that isn't a good enough GPU to really max out a CPU of this caliber, so I'm testing at 1080p maximum settings, but with as much FSR as I need to make sure the CPU is the limit, not the GPU. The longer I keep Cyberpunk 2077 on my benchmarking roster, the more it feels like a documentary. The latest update has added FSR3 support, but removed the Ultra Performance preset, so this was tested at FSR Performance, meaning a render resolution of 960 by 540. At Ultra, the game averages 116 FPS with lows of 75, but there are occasions where it becomes GPU limited, so a higher performing graphics card might be able to squeeze a couple more frames out of it. At the RT Ultra preset, the average drops to 99, and again, the GPU is holding things back a bit here. Baldur's Gate 3 isn't one of the games that really needs super high frame rates, but nevertheless it is one that older, weaker CPUs can struggle with. My AM4 results from this game may need a revisit because the last time I tested the Ryzen 1700 through 5700, they performed terribly compared to even the cheapest AM5 chip. The 7800X3D, meanwhile, shouldn't be troubled even by the most demanding areas of the game, and in my walk through the city of Baldur's Gate, I saw an average of 180 FPS with 1% lows of 118. Another game that can tear weaker chips to pieces, Space Marine 2 is a little more friendly to the higher-end AM4 chips, like the 5700X3D, but it could still be a good reason to upgrade. In this quite intense horde scene, the 7800X3D averages close to 140 FPS, with 1% lows still over 100. Those lows are actually higher than the average FPS from the 5700X3D, which only manages around 95, and while your current GPU might not be up to the task, bear in mind I had to run at FSR Ultra Performance to make the game CPU limited, some hypothetical future graphics card will allow you to enjoy these frame rates, but without the blurriness. Several of Sony's recent console ports have proven to be extremely CPU demanding, and that includes The Last of Us Part 2. That being said, even at FSR Ultra Performance, the game is pretty much GPU limited, so while the 7800X3D can score 147 FPS on average in this section of gameplay near Seattle, it could potentially go even higher with a more powerful GPU. And if The Last of Us was demanding, Spider-Man 2 is even more so, especially once RT is enabled. In rasterized mode, it's pulling 128 FPS with lows around 80, and this is very much CPU limited. With ultimate ray tracing enabled, the GPU does hold things back, however, even with the render resolution dropped to 360p. Once the simulation quality is turned up, the Hitman 3 benchmark can turn into a very heavy game for CPUs, but the 7800X3D handles it beautifully. Without ray tracing, it's pushing 240 FPS, though some moments do come crashing down, and that means the 1% lows are lower than you might expect. Once RT's turned on, the average is cut in half, though the percentile lows hold up slightly better. I'm including Dune Awakening out of personal curiosity. I'm not sure how much demand there is among you guys for benchmarks from this game, but after my RTX 2060 Super review, I felt like testing it again to see how it holds up with some better hardware. There are still a lot of frame time spikes, this is UE5 after all, but there are fewer occasions where the whole thing falls apart. I don't know if these problems are necessarily being fixed by the CPU rather than the GPU, but either way, there's a solid enough experience to be had here with an average of 120 FPS. Alright, this is where the rubber meets the road. The really big numbers come in games like CS2, and because you're more likely to play these competitive games at low settings, that's what I've done here, the low preset with resolution scaling turned off. The 7900 XT does have enough horsepower to deliver the goods here, and in a Dust 2 deathmatch with real players, the CPU delivers around 340 FPS on average. I've actually seen better both on the 5700X3D and 7945HX3D using the same GPU and same settings, but I put that down to the inconsistency of benchmarking live games rather than using the built-in benchmark. That is an option, but I have my doubts as to how relevant that benchmark is to CPUs. Considering the overlap with CS2, I don't usually test Valorant anymore. I'm making an exception here because it's just been ported over to Unreal Engine 5, and in a completely unexpected turn of events, it was rumoured to actually perform better as a result. My experience isn't quite as rosy as other creators have found, but it still performs stunningly well on the 7800X3D. The best result I saw on the old version of the game was 700 FPS on the 7900X3D, and the 7800X3D can hit 745. I did notice a couple of glitches, like a floating gun at one point, but that might be down to my dog water internet connection as much as anything. Another one I've officially ditched, but unofficially come back to when my patience isn't wearing too thin. Fortnite can be a mess of terrible frame pacing even now, after years of crisp, cruelly but accurately labelling it Stutter Night. On the 7800X3D, however, there wasn't much of that at all. Usually I'd need to play 2 or 3 games until the stutters start to smooth out a bit, but this time the first game was remarkably smooth. I still waited for the second round to start benchmarking, however, and in DX12 at low settings with epic view distance, that saw an average of 336 FPS. This was occasionally hitting the GPU limit, however, so for match 3 I added some performance upscaling, and that saw averages climb by an extra 10% or so. The production of this video happened to be during Battlefield 6's open beta, and all the cool kids were playing it, so I thought I'd better try it too. However, it is a beta, and by definition means that any data I capture is likely to be out of date by the time it's actually useful. Arguably, by this point in development, you'd hope that the basic code of the game was finalised, and performance would be pretty close to perfect. But we've seen examples of games that played terribly in their betas and wouldn't improve until much later. Like, Battlefield 2042. But then again, perhaps I'm overthinking it. Doesn't all of this mess of numbers fade into irrelevance in time, made obsolete by the changing tides of game updates, OS patches and new drivers? What if Battlefield 6 is bad actually? Will anyone even care about this data by the time the game finally releases? How about in 10 years' time, when the servers are closed down and EA pulls the game from shelves? Should I look at this as time wasted, or am I not destined to waste my time anyway, perpetually churning out content that will one day be rendered utterly meaningless? Can anyone truly build a legacy on a foundation as chaotic as 21st century consumer technology? I'm not saying it. But yes, the 7800X3D can handle the notoriously heavy 2007 shooter from Crytek, the people who consistently bring you superb opening thirds and then ruin them with mutants and aliens and stuff. I know some fans of Crysis will complain about my turning off motion blur, and honestly in modern AAA games it usually doesn't bother me, so I often leave it turned on, but in this case it definitely made the game feel sluggish and weird, so I turned it off. The average FPS is a healthy 158, but it could still get better. The GPU isn't being fully utilised, so the 9800X3D could presumably do even better. The subtitle of this channel is Today's Games, Yesterday's Hardware, and technically that's still true here. But don't get confused, the Ryzen 7 7800X3D is still a great CPU, one of the best out there for gaming, and clearly has the horsepower to handle a far more powerful GPU than this one. The problem with this CPU right now is that it's hard to see why you need it. If you're building a new PC with a 5080 or 5090, or are waiting for the 5080 Super, you can probably justify spending the extra 100 or so towards the 9800X3D, whether it's a practical benefit or not. If you're a bit more frugal, however, with an eye towards something that will last until AM6 and beyond, the 7800X3D is elite tier performance for slightly below elite tier money. For everyone else, just get the 7500F. If you are thinking of buying any of these CPUs on AliExpress, the links are below, and don't forget to use my discount codes to get them even cheaper. Thanks again to AliExpress for sponsoring the video, thanks to you for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.